Hi, this is Mike Bauman, and you're listening to the Cinematography podcast. But once he hit that moment when you're coming over the hill and he pulls focus right to it and then throws it back, even on the small monitors, like
brilliant.
Holy shit, that's crazy. And Paul was like, I don't know if I'm going to use that. And it was like,
oh.
This is Cinepod, the Cinematography podcast, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image presented by Hot Rod Cameras. I'm your host, Ilya Friedman, and today on our show, we interview cinematographer Michael Bauman. He just received an Academy Award nomination for Best Cinematography on One Battle After Another. Before becoming a cinematographer, Mike started his career as a gaffer, working on renowned films like Nightcrawler, Ford v Ferrari, and Munich. He's been the DP for director Paul Thomas Anderson's prior movies, Phantom Thread and Licorice Pizza. In this episode, you'll learn how Mike's experience as a gaffer influences his lighting choices as a cinematographer, the free jazz improvisational style of Paul Thomas Anderson's directing, the challenges of shooting One Battle After Another in the large VistaVision format in real remote locations, how they shot the movie's incredible car chase sequence. After the interview, stick around for our short ends, our pet obsessions of the week, but first find out what's going on in the world of entertainment in a segment called Close Focus. Hey there, Ben Rock. It is time for our Close Focus. It's the time when we talk about what's going on in the world of entertainment, and we should probably make note of the fact that it's right before the Oscars are going to be announced this week.
Yeah, as we're recording, we don't know who the nominees are. We won't know until Thursday, which will probably be the day of or the day before this episode drops.
Exactly right. I expect this episode goes out on Friday, and so that means we won't be talking about what might be the big news that everyone's talking about, which is Oscar nominations, but we are sure we'll get to it the following week. Anyway, so Ben, for Close Focus, I've noticed sort of an interesting thing going on, which is people suddenly having a reversal or a switch on AI. I'm wondering if you've encountered this as well too, because like, for example, I watch this YouTube channel occasionally called F-Stoppers, which is all about photography, and the people who run that channel, one of them is a commercial photographer, the other one does headshots and weddings, and they've started releasing videos. They've jumped on this bandwagon of that, like, photography is going to be obsolete. No one's going to hire professional photographers anymore. Everyone's going to use Google or Sora or Nano Banana or one of these other things that...
Like for weddings?
Definitely for headshots and product photography, which I think is, where they probably make a fair bit of their bread and butter. And I would have a tendency possibly to agree a little bit, because I think that there are certain aspects that people are making livings right now that are probably going to get disrupted from AI. Although the idea that all photography and that photography is dead, I think is ridiculous, because it is a documentation of something that actually happened. And just because you have a nice looking headshot doesn't mean that you aren't going to have other photography or other things that are...
I got to be honest, it turns me off a little bit when somebody's professional headshot is clearly AI. And, there's always this conversation of like, well, this is as bad as it's ever going to be, and it's only going to get better. But I have been noticing, and this is, maybe you disagree, that I feel like it's been kind of, the curve has been flattening off a little bit. Like, AI has gotten better in the last 3 years, and I've experimented with it and goofed off with it quite a bit. But I feel like it's very good, but it's never completely convincing. I will say that sometimes I'll see a picture someone's posted to social media or something, not if it's from a legitimate news source, but something that's like floating around the internet, and I'll have to kind of look at it and go like, is that AI? Because it's too easy for stuff to get passed around. But I don't know. I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel like 8 times out of 10, I can spot AI immediately.
Agreed.
10 times out of 10, if I really look at it, I can be like, eh. And I feel like if you suspect like someone's headshot or a product shot is AI, it probably is.
So here's the thing. I think that even if, let's say you can't spot it, it has fooled you. I think for the most part that there is still a negative association for most people seeing something that's actually not real then. So
It's a negative association, I think, if it's being put forward as this is a real thing. If you're saying like, here's a product shot of, a cucumber that I'm putting in my salad and it's clearly AI, that's a turnoff. If you're using AI for some wacky creative Sora garbage that's just kind of fun goofiness, no one cares. That's fine.
So what I think is kind of interesting, though, is that there seems to be the programming of almost a generation of people who have decided that not only is the AI stuff okay, it is probably better than what they were going to do anyway. And that is sort of their get out of jail on this. They're like, oh, well, it's going to be better than I would have done some other way, so I'm just going to go with this. I don't know if we should be setting the bar at that point. I heard recently that Porsche made an animated commercial, and they had a disclaimer very clearly that no generative AI was used at all in the commercial. And I kind of feel like this is all missing the point, though. This is much ado about the wrong thing. Just like when we were talking to the guys at Asteria, I think that really what is going on right now is that AI is not being presented to us as just a tool, like a better hammer or a better, sandpaper, or a better paintbrush.
Stay tuned for my short end, because I will be presenting AI as a tool that I'm using on a project right now.
And I think that when it exists that way, no one's going to really know, or no one's going to care. And frankly, I go back to this all the time, but in the visual effects industry now in Hollywood, 5 years prior to, AI becoming this thing, since at least 2019, I knew people who were using AI and fooling the hell out of people. And it was just a VFX. It was just a thing. It was not considered like, the end of the world. It still took an awful lot of work to coax it into existence.
Which I remain steadfast in saying that's where it's going to be used the most. I don't think it's going to damage the industry. I think it's just going to become the tool of choice because it gets you to your result faster.
So here is what I think that rather than just treading over the same turf that we have had several times for this sort of conversation, I think what would be helpful to our listeners and viewers is to talk about where the slippery slope begins and how you can start to realize when AI might be coming for your job. And so like everything so far that has to do with cameras and technology, I think we have to look at porn. We have to look at porn first. Is AI generation completely taking over the porn? I don't think so. I don't think that has...
I will defer to your superior expertise in the subject.
I was hoping you'd say that, but here's the thing. I haven't heard any stories about porn.
It's got to exist, though, right? Like
it does exist. But
I mean, isn't that like the whole thing that like they on Grok and some of the other ones where they took off the guardrails so you can basically make people look naked?
You can make
and
people
stuff,
look topless. This is what's happening. But I wanted to bring this up too because like occasionally there are adult performers and adult people who work in that industry who purchase cameras from my company, and I have conversations with them about what's going on in their world. And I am not seeing or hearing any of those people going out of business. I don't hear about those people saying like, well, time for me to, get off the mattress. I got nothing to do here because, now AI has taken my jobs. I believe that long before you have to worry about AI generated, Timothy Chalamet, AI generated, movie theaters or television shows that people are watching, porn is going to be completely,
Are you calling it the punani in the coal mine? Sorry.
You know what? Frankly, that you're not far off there. I think that having this canary, this punani, whatever you want to call it, in the coal mine, as sort of like a benchmark, I think that when you start to see that happen, then know that like that first domino has fallen. And I think that's still a long way off because I'm not seeing huge disruption, not the disruption that existed just like a few years ago when, user generated porn took away a bunch of work from professionals. So I don't.
Uncanny Valley actually sounds like a porn star from the 80s.
It really does. So, okay, let's say then after porn, the next thing to fall, I'm going to say commercial, sort of like industrial photography.
I see all kinds. Okay, so like especially on YouTube, I'm seeing tons and tons of commercials that are 100% generative AI. And you can sort of spot them and they come up, and usually it's like at the not peak hours. But when I see it, I'm like, oh, it's kind of interesting because, like once upon a time commercials were made by a giant film crew. And then, over the last 5-10 years, they figured out how to just have like one influencer with their iPhone be the person making the commercial. And now it's like, oh yeah, now we get to cut all people out of it and just make a commercial. And sometimes it's like a very cinematic narrative thing, but it's just like, it just kind of looks a little
weird. It's a little bit off. I think the people are sometimes a little bit weird and a little bit off. And the lack of subtlety, I would say. And frankly, for some levels of commercials, that probably doesn't matter. But at the same time, will there be any sort of consumer backlash against companies that are doing it? I mean, will there be a thing that people decide that this is no longer acceptable? I don't know. And currently, I mean, according to the F-Stopper guys in their recent videos, it sounds like they think that it's already done, that the consumers have decided that this is fine. I think that because there's a lack of subtlety, a lack of empathy, and a lack of just absolute reality that comes from much of this AI generated stuff, it's going to take a very, very long time, very, very long time before, the normal everyday person just accepts that as like, this is now my world of entertainment. And I think ultimately it comes down to the consumer. It comes down to the person who's spending their money. If you don't want to see that stuff, don't spend your money on it. And I think that if people decide to do that, we will have a very vibrant, very long career in all of these areas and all of these things that could be disrupted by potentially AI. But, I think there's people out there who have decided that this is just the world they want to live in. I have not decided that. I think that it's not going to happen. Anyway, Ben, Michael Bauman is on the show today, and we have a great interview coming up with him, and I think that we should probably get to it.
Let's do it.
Hey, we're joined now by Mike Bauman. You've got a new movie called One Battle After Another. It's a little movie.
Little indie film.
Mike, hey, welcome to the Cinematography Podcast.
Thank you.
You've been around for a long time as a gaffer, and according to IMDb, in 2021 you started as a DP. You've moved into DP work, so really only in the last 5 years or so. I want to talk all about this, but first, I don't know you. You and I have never met before today, but I know a bunch of the people who work for you because you're an entrepreneur. You've got a couple of companies. I know you're involved with Lightgear. I know you've got Lux Lighting. My company has spent a lot of money with your company over the years. We've bought a lot of stuff, for Lightgear in particular. I want to ask you about, there's not a lot of DPs, not a lot of people in this industry who move between the freelance world, move between the technician world of working on set and also entrepreneurship. How do you manage all of those different hats?
No, it's a lot. It's definitely a lot, but it all came from the driving idea of seeing, when we started Lightgear, that was back in 2006. And really that kind of came from seeing the need for just the frustration I was having as a gaffer of some of the lighting options that were available at the time, and how to come up with new things and really develop lighting that could be things that could inspire also production designers and help people do their, just really kind of create their own type of light that they needed for their purposes. And so we kind of started with flexible LED back before it was even as just saturated as it is now. And, and then building dimmers and things like that for it to kind of, that were really film friendly, that wouldn't flicker and things like that. So that's kind of where it came. And then, we started just connecting with a lot of production designers and people like that, and gaffers who were just looking to integrate this stuff into set design and things of that nature.
Yeah, it's really interesting though, because so few people in this industry actually do that. So few people, I've been working on the technical side for 30 years. Can you talk just a little bit more before we get into the movie and all that fun stuff though, about your philosophy of business and how to do this? Is it that you just love all these different things and you can bifurcate yourself in these different ways? Or clearly you've got some choices. You could go full-time one way or another, but
especially now,
keep it all going. Yeah.
As much duress as the business is under right now, and just fundamental change that's happening, there is so much more opportunity that's coming with tech. Not, and when I say in tech, it, as it's like when you say the word tech, that's such a huge word. But yeah, but I think it's like uh, there is some really exciting things going on right now that are like, wow, this is. You can see how I think there's this hybridization of just different pieces of technology and how they're going to change the storytelling experience. And it's not to say like you can't still do it in the traditional manner, but there's just all this interesting stuff. And so just to me, I think the thing is I always look for what is just keeping me inspired and interested. And I think, you know, not that everything is, it was really the intention was to start a business and make money. It was more like, okay, how do we answer this problem that we have, and how do we kind of create a solution for this challenge that I keep having every time I'm on set or in these lighting situations or something like that. And that was kind of the genesis of where the ideas came for Lightyear. And and Lux Lighting started as it was just a rental. We were just doing rentals, but it was also kind of like building little things that just kind of were more customized solutions just to help out the workflow during, because it's always about providing solutions as a gaffer. You're trying to understand the vision that the cinematographer has in their head or the director has, and how to realize that as efficiently as possible. And those aren't sometimes those tools that you need to do that aren't just the necessary stuff that's always sitting on the shelf. So, but fortunately in LA, there's a lot of different, obviously there's a whole cast of characters here that have, it's like that scene in Taken, where he's like, I don't have any money, but I have all the skills that have been honed for 30 years of doing different things. And you have all these people here who just have these unique skill sets that once you kind of get plugged into that community, you realize, wow, we can really do some stuff here and solve some problems.
All right. So before we get into the movie too, then being a DP, official, like, on the call sheet, DP, relatively new thing for you. But you've got all this experience. Talk a little bit about the transition. What inspired you? Is this something you always wanted to do and just now finally took the plunge, or how did it come about?
So I went to film school at AFI way back with and I went for cinematography. I did a year of that, and then it was kind of like this was in the early '90s, so it wasn't nearly as much cash as it was now. But it was just I could only afford 1 year, and so I started kind of working as a gaffer and in the electrical department, and just started kind of working with lighting because I've always had a love for lighting. And so then just over the years, just getting to work with so many different cinematographers as either electrician, a best boy, or a gaffer. I really kind of came up from that side of things. And some of my classmates went on to be really successful cinematographers. I mean, one of my oldest friends is Maddie Libatique, and we went to school together. And yeah, and so we've always been having a healthy dialogue about stuff in general. And Eric Messerschmitt's another really good friend that we crossed paths when we were both gaffing and doing things like that. And so I think the thing is what's interesting kind of about I think for my journey was just that I got to really understand a lot of people's processes and really see how so many different cinematographers solve problems or creatively come up with solutions or have interesting ways of telling stories. And I got to also have the luxury of working with and be fortunate enough to work with several European cinematographers who'd come over to the United States. And so it was really interesting to see kind of the American approach of problem solving versus the European approach. And so I think all of that stuff was really, I never really had the burning desire to be like, okay, I got to be a cinematographer and start shooting. It was more just like, I just always wanted to work with interesting people and just tell interesting stories. And so for me, it was really not so much about like, how do I get on the biggest shows and make, and all that as a metric of success. It was more just like, who's got something interesting. And so that's led to some interesting, some fun projects over the years. and stuff that, wasn't necessarily the reason you do it from a financial perspective, but the script was really good. I remember one time, I'd done a couple movies with Robert Elswit, and he was like, "Hey, I got this movie. It's it's 26-day show, so it's a tiered movie, which means the rates are lower, and in 24 of the 26 days are nights." And I was like, "Ooh, that's a hell of a sales pitch." And he's like, "Well, just read the script." And I read the script, and I was like, as soon as I read the script, I was like, I'm in, because it was this movie called Nightcrawler, and the script was like so
brilliant.
compelling. Yeah,
Ben and I don't agree on a lot of things.
yeah.
We both picked Nightcrawler as our best of the year. So,
And we've talked to Bob about that. I mean, it's
Yeah.
interesting. When you started shooting for Paul Thomas Anderson, did you talk to Bob about working with him at all, or did you get any pointers?
Not well. I'd gaffed Inherent Vice, and so I got to see. That was the last one that Bob did with Paul, and so it kind of had a ringside seat to their process, and so and just from talking to Robert over the years, I kind of had a pretty good idea of like, okay, Paul's tendencies and his things that he likes and stuff like that, and so and I had done the master previously too. With I did that in 2011. That was my first time working with Paul and the whole team, and so it was pretty interesting. Just an interesting path into that, into kind of syncing up with that world, because it was a lot of different. It kind of came in very much as a hired gun at first, and so and then with Mihai shooting that one, was shooting the master. And then I went on to do Inherent Vice with those guys and with Robert. And I had already done, at that point I'd done probably, I think 4 movies we did. Robert and I we did Good Night, Good Luck, Nightcrawler, Syriana, and Inherent Vice together.
Wow.
Yeah.
All heavy hitters. Wow. Those are all great films.
every one of those a banger. So
Yeah, for real. And
Yeah.
all brilliantly lit,
Yeah,
brilliantly lensed.
Yeah, it was really interesting seeing his style, and it's one of the fun things about being a gaffer is you just get to work with so many different people. And that was one of my goals, is just like, how do I work with a lot of interesting folks who just have just completely different approaches, and and how do you see, like, like I only got to work with Janusz once, and did a movie in uh, a while back called Munich, and which was just probably one of the hardest movies I'd done. But it was just interesting to see a completely different philosophy that he has on lighting and approach. And you're kind of like a sous chef, working with him, and you got to have everything ready and a plan and a backup plan to that plan. And then when you turn it all on, he gives you so much creative leash to light. But then, he'll be like, "Hey, turn that off, turn this on," da, 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 da. And within, very rapidly, you get to the space where we're ready to go. And so it's just a very different approach from other people I'd worked with. And so just for me as a gaffer to be able to see all this kind of stuff and then distill that into a lot of, just over the years, and just distill that into kind of like, okay, it wasn't even like I said, me moving into cinematography wasn't even really like I drew a line in the sand or anything. It was more like Paul was like, "Hey, I got a music video I want to do." And this was with Haim, that band that we do a lot of stuff with. And he's like, let's just do it real small. We only do it with like 10 people. And it's just some simple thing in a recording studio. And then he was like, "Oh, I got this other thing." And then it was like, "Hey, Radiohead's got this video they want to do. But what if we tried doing it like the same way?" And so we went into this daydreaming Radiohead music video. And then while we were shooting that, he was like, "What do you think if we did a movie this way?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's give it a whirl." And we went over and did Phantom Thread. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting how it evolved in, because it wasn't like, all right, I'm going to start shooting now, and this is, forget all the gaffing stuff. I was still kind of dabbling in all of it at the time. Because I remember I did Phantom Thread, and then I came back and I did Vice. I gaffed Vice for Greg Fraser. And, it was just interesting to see just the different headspaces you occupy in those positions.
One of the things when we started the podcast a gajillion years ago, I would always ask people if when they read a script, if they saw it in composition or if they saw the lighting, like did one or the other or something else occur to them. I eventually retired asking that question because almost nobody had one or the other. But it made me kind of develop a theory, and I'm curious to ask you about this, which is I feel like people who come up through lighting when they become cinematographers become way more interested in lenses, and vice versa. People who come up through the camera department get way more excited about lighting. Does lighting still excite you the way that it has as a gaffer for years, or the fact that you're getting your hands on I lost count, somewhere around 25 lenses that you were shooting this on, like? Is the lensing becoming lensing and composition and framing becoming more of a new exciting thing to play with for you?
I mean, I still get very excited about light, and just like everything that there's so much disruption happening on the lighting side of the fence right now, as there has been in camera, but there's really a lot on the lighting side, and so it's really interesting to see what kind of technologies are out there, even that have come out in the last 2 years, and things you can do with them. And then that coupled with a digital sensor, it's just a pretty interesting combo at times. And even just taking the new technology in with film and just what you can pull off. I mean, certainly, lensing and all that stuff it was a little intimidating. It still is intimidating because you go, you go into Panavision or any of these places, and there's just so much glass, and you're just like, I don't even know where to begin. It's like, hey, here's 200 ingredients. What kind of pepper do you want? And it's like, I don't even know where to start. And so it's been interesting, like just kind of getting my head wrapped around it, and at least knowing how to have some of the, knowing, just getting more plugged into that community and understanding how to navigate it better. And so for me, I think it's a great balance right now of the two, because there's exciting stuff happening in both directions.
Well, let's hop into one battle after another, because to me, this is an exciting film to see. I mean, anytime there's a new Paul Thomas Anderson movie, I'm excited. Even the ones that don't personally hit me are interesting and fascinating. And this is one of the ones that I walked out and I was like, I think I just saw the best picture. Like that, it's such a strong film. It's so brilliantly done, and we'll get to it. But the chase scene at the end, I want to hear all about how you shot it, because I when you say bullet, I get it, but I've never seen a
French Connection.
Oh, French Connection. Sorry, I've never seen a chase scene that looked like that chase scene. Like that chase scene just blew my mind. But let's kind of start with the decision. The elephant in the room to me is the decision to shoot on VistaVision, which is something that more and more people are kind of coming back to. Robbie Ryan talked to us about it. We've talked to a few people about it, and it's an exciting format. But I'm always curious, why VistaVision? Why not 70? Why not 35?
Yeah, I mean, I think look, it all stems from Paul, and he was really about he had shot VistaVision on a long form music video he did with Tom York called Anima. Mm-hmm. That I was doing another project, and they went over and shot, I think in Prague or something, and Darius Kanji shot it. And I think that was his first taste in experimenting with it, because anytime he does any of the short form stuff, obviously he's going to do an excellent job at what they're doing, but it's really also the nefarious goal of testing it for something else.
R&D, yeah.
And so R&D. Yeah, totally R&D. And I think he really looked at it was an intriguing format to him. And I think I think it's also he always is talking on any project I've ever done with him about how does it end up in 70 millimeter. And how does it end? What is the blow up like? And one of the things about him as a filmmaker is he cuts negative. You watch film dailies. You are doing the process as it had been done for decades. A lot of times when people shoot on film, they scan the film and then it's digital from there on out. And if they do produce a print, it's generally a film out or something like that. But most of the time, it's just delivered as a DCP to most of the folk who see it. With Paul, it is all about cut negative. And so you are, for him, that's where I think that was another reason for VistaVision, because he was looking at how do I get a bigger negative, more resolution, and not, not shoot IMAX. He'd already done 70 millimeter with a master. And I think the thing that's intriguing also, with the Bocam is just it was an interesting challenge to be able to like get a large negative, but still use something that's a little more compact. With VistaVision, it was like, okay, here we go again. We're going to take a format that hasn't really been, tested as much, and we're going to run 1.5 million feet of film through it. And so so I think the Vista conversation really started with like, what is the end the audience going to experience? And it was, how do you get to a big format in a different path other than doing what shooting on IMAX or something of that nature. But he also shoots practical locations almost all the time. So the Vista camera was a good way of being able to get into all these small interiors without having as many sound. It has its own sound issues, there's no doubt, but it was certainly a way, just to physically fit the camera into spaces that we couldn't have fit in if it was like IMAX or something like that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, in many ways, this movie feels like it gets quite intimate and quite small, and you're in small spaces. And I'm thinking specifically of like, the hideout, safe house sort of like spaces and things like that. And I imagine is much of this built on sets? Is it all location work? How is it working with what is probably one of the larger and heavier film formats out there in some of these spaces?
With VistaVision, it's like most of the time, it's generally been historically used as like, when I would see it when I was working as an electrician, when it would come out in like the 90s, it would be like mainly for visual effects, and it would sit on a tripod and that kind of thing. And the language of this entire movie was it's all about camera movement. It is all about like handheld, steady cam, all this kind of stuff. And so how do you take this format, which, has a viewing system which comes off the top of the camera at 45 degrees, and turn it into something that can perform and capture the story in the way he wants to capture it. And so like, it was a lot of testing. Like we did 15. I think we did about 13 tests before we started the movie, and then we did a couple while we were still shooting. And there was a lot of fixing the plane while we were flying it, especially the first few weeks, because we were learning a lot of the idiosyncrasies of the camera. And it was really tough there's a lot of stressful times in the camera department. Serge Nafta, who was the first, he had you needed people who had the right, who could be open-minded about all this. This wasn't for everybody, And so that was putting the team together was really critical also. It's finding the right people, who were just like down with working with this, because this was like, okay, this is unproven technology. Here we go, and we got to make this schedule. So, and we're not in LA. We're not near in LA or New York, or where the facilities that could support it are. We started up at the top of California and worked our way down. So yeah, it was a challenge. But to speak to what some of the sets and things were, is that, a lot of times it was practical locations, but and even sometimes when we did build a set, it wasn't on a stage. It was like the scene with Sensei's apartment, that when they're going through the apartment, the skateboarders, and he makes the phone call. He makes the phone call to Comrade Josh. And, that whole thing, when we found it, so we're in El Paso, and that is the second floor of an abandoned building. Or wasn't the first floor? It was empty on the second floor. The first floor was like small shops, which we shot on the exterior. And the reason we were up there is because we wanted to have the windows and look out the windows and potentially see, what was going on outside, and bringing that inside. And so Florencia Martin, the production designer, she and Andrew Kahn, the art director, like, had this entirely empty floor. It's a second floor, but it's a historic building. And the entire set, so the only wall that existed in the entire place was the perimeter walls, which is basically the wall that was behind the couch where he's making the phone call. and the windows to the next to them. That was all that was of the set. The hallway, everything else they created, and the trapdoor and the floor were really the only two physical things that happened. And so Andrew Kahn, the art director, had to, Flo had her design, and Andrew had to figure out how to load that entire set in through a window on the second floor. So the whole set had to be built and measured, and so it could be created and set up that way.
Insane.
It was interesting because, that was a job because, they didn't construct it in El Paso. They constructed it back in LA and set it up on a stage in LA.
Oh, wow.
So they could make sure it all fit and worked. And he figured out the set could be no bigger than 4-foot by 9-foot sections. And so they created a panel, out of some plywood, and then walked it up the stairs and through the window just to make sure they could physically actually get the set into the space. And it was that level of like detail and things of that nature, which were pretty interesting. And I thought was really clever is Anthony Carlino, the set decorator, who I've done a bunch of movies with and have a really good dialogue with. He dressed that entire set off of Facebook Marketplace in El Paso and various thrift stores, and it's just like that kind of like, but I think that's so critical to like the texture of it.
Yeah, it feels like real stuff. It doesn't. The movie feels lived in. It doesn't feel like it's taking place on perfect movie sets. Which there are movies where that's exactly what you want, and this movie has such a lived in feel from top to bottom. Every space, even kind of the antiseptic looking offices, where like the last scenes of the movie take place, and still feel like real offices, very lived in.
Yeah.
How do you approach that from the lighting standpoint? Because it's a movie that I know this is a style that's just as hard to nail as anything else, but it doesn't feel like lit with a capital L. It feels like it feels like I Am Cuba or something. It feels like we're just there and seeing it unfold in front of us. Like what was your ethos and philosophy in designing the way you were going to light all those spaces?
Paul's heavily involved in every conversation on anything in the movie. You have a lot, and I think a lot of it is developing the language for what this film is. Like when we did Phantom Thread, there was a certain process we went through on that to find out what what that movie had to look like. And this one was really about like, since our references were the French Connection and The Last Detail and all this, and he and I watched a bunch of 70s cinema, just to kind of figure out how to emulate that texture. And so, and the test would be, really getting an idea of what the visual and color language was, what our practicals were, what our light sources were, all that kind of stuff. And, he was always about like, you kind of come at it from a very open mind. You have to have an open mind with him because it's like, one of the first things he said is like, I want this to be really small. And, okay, cool, small. Yeah, sure. And then, you read the script and you're like, okay, dude, this is anything but small as far as scale and scope. But he's like, okay, we're going to be small. And he was really adamant about going out and like, he went out on eBay and he bought like these $75 kits of little Toda lights that he had, from the 70s, umbrellas, the whole thing. And he's like, what do you think if we lit the movie with these? And I'm like, okay.
He says to the guy who owns two lighting companies.
Yeah. But I'm like, look, I'm down with the challenge. Let's do it. Cause it's all about like, all right, how do we, what is resonating with him? Ultimately, the question is what's resonating with him about this that is really, how do we translate that? And for him, it was about the loose and rough style of like 70s cinema. And so, but we had to have a really light footprint and we're shooting film. And, so it's just, when you kind of go through all the math of all the technical requirements in that combination and cocktail, and what's new technology that you can use and what's old technology that you can adapt. And so it was a lot of like trying to figure things out and of what's our lighting package look like. And so, we had certain locations that we were able to really go big on and like light it like a traditional, all right, let's go crazy. Like the the scene where she meets Lockjaw for the first time, where Willa meets Lockjaw, and we shot that at a California mission, huge room, and we're there, and it's like, well, let's light this with tungsten, block all the ambient light, and let's just get a bunch of maxi brutes and just get the generators and go big. And so there's moments like that, and then there's moments like, okay, this is we got to be very light and nimble, and what does that look like? And so and a lot of the practical locations we shot at too, they had a ton of limitations. Like we were down at the border wall, and we're trying to shoot everything like a lot of last light for our night work, so there's at least something in the sky, and so time is a huge issue and all that kind of stuff. We certainly used like LEDs and new technology, even though he's always all over me about like, why don't you use some real lights, like, and then,
what if this room was 120 degrees? What if I was sweating so much that I couldn't see the monitor anymore?
Yeah. And we had that conversation a lot on Phantom Thread, where it's like, he's like, do you need to use all these LEDs? I'm like, I'm happily use HMI and tungsten, no problem. Let's do it. But, to create the kind of quality of light that we need, I need like 8 feet of room instead of, 8 inches. And so your frame is going to be way different because we're going to have lights everywhere. The thing about this film that there's just a tremendous amount of improvisation that was happening also. And so you had to just be ready for a lot of different stuff to go down, and just had to have again, it goes back to having the team of folk who are on the journey with you, who have really great energy and are open to what this journey is going to be. I'm rabbit holing the shit out of this thing. I'm sorry.
No, this is what we want. No, this is the best stuff. This is what we want. It's always the people who give like a 3-word but correct answer that we're like, having to pull more stuff out of, because we want to hear your whole process, your whole thought process. And I kind of I'm tired of waiting to eat dessert, so I want to talk about the chase sequence at the end.
Yeah,
because
sure.
To me, like when I walked out of the movie, kind of like on fire, jacked by your film, like just really excited about what I had just seen. I think that scene above all was the one that just kind of stuck in my head, because we've all seen a million zillion car chases, and I've never seen one that looked anything like that. That scene is one of the most tense. I was like waiting for something horrible to happen at every second. And, it was that bumpy topography where it's like, you can't see what's coming over the next hill, but it was also it was so much about the way that you use the lensing and you use the camera to create claustrophobia in what I imagine was a giant wide open space.
Yeah. I mean it really all started with the location, and, which Michael Glazier, the location manager, who's, this was down in the border of California and Arizona. And there was a location we were looking at called Walter's Camp, which is where the scene where the bounty hunter Avante brings her and drops her off at, to basically be killed. Well, Michael was driving back from that location. He was like, hey, I found this road. It's kind of interesting. And but it's like 4 hours from LA, so we should go look at it. And he was describing it, and he had a little bit of video, but he showed it to Flo, and Flo was like, this is pretty cool. We should go check this out. So like 6 of us, Paul and like 6 of us jumped in a van, and we drove out there, and just were kind of going up and down the road and looking at all of it. And as we're going up and down, you're kind of seeing what this is just the unique topography of the whole thing. And we started pulling out the iPhones and just seeing like, okay, put your phone up against the back window, and let's just see how it looks when it goes up and down and all this kind of stuff. And it was like, because in the third act, in that scene, he kind of had written it like there's going to be a car chase, but he didn't really have it all put pen to paper, as far as like kind of what exactly it looked like. He didn't. And so once he discovered this road, that really kind of like things really clicked for him. And so once we had found the location, we ended up trying to figure out what this toolbox would be that we'd need to kind of get the camera as low as possible, all this kind of really take it on the road. And we went over to Alan's shop, and in Santa Clarita and did a bunch of tests where we put a VistaVision camera on his arm car, which is, it's a Mercedes. It's got a long, I think it's like a 25-foot arm that can swing around and do all that. And he has also he's got a Porsche that's got just has an elevator rig. So you can get, and which is really key because you can get the camera way down on the ground, like a few inches above the ground with that thing. And we just started doing some tests with that, with some lenses. And that was kind of the start of like, okay, let's really, this is going to give us it was clear that with wide lenses, it was like incredible the stuff we were getting, just even in Santa Clarita, running around on the streets around his place. And so then we eventually brought everything out there, and we shot out there for like 7 days. And it was really challenging because it's a very busy road, because it's one of the few roads that crosses over into Arizona down there that trucks can be on. And we could only lock it up for, I think, like 10 minutes tops. And so every time we'd lock it up, it was literally like a train, because I'm trying to, how to describe this. We'd shoot basically 3 things at once a lot of the times. So we'd have one picture car in front, and we'd have the camera behind it. We're all traveling in the same direction. Then we have another one, which had the camera mounted in the back, and the car we're photographing is behind it. So you're shooting the back of one car and the front of the other as you're driving. And then we had this device called a biscuit, which is like a platform that you can put a car on. It's very close to the ground. And then that would also be a little farther down the road, so we wouldn't photograph it, and we could shoot with that too. And so you'd really get, in your 10-minute section of lockup, you do one pass, but you'd be trying to shoot 3 things at once. And then you'd have to release traffic, which usually took 15 minutes or so, and then lock it back up and try again. So it was and it was really hot. I mean, it was like well into, it was 100 degrees during the day.
Looks it.
And so there was, technical problems would come up from that. Just because of the heat, you'd be cold in the morning and hot in the afternoon. And so it was just a lot of cutting it together. And then we're always, every couple of days, we'd shoot, and we'd get the dailies the next day to really look at the footage. And one of the things was we always look at film daily. So we were always reviewing the footage you shot the day before, 2 days before, at night at the hotel. And that was really critical, just to kind of look at what we need and what we thought we might need, what we should add and all this kind of stuff. And I think what really makes the sequence great is how Andy and Paul edited the thing. And then the incredible score by Johnny Greenwood, and, just the use of percussion and that whole thing, and just how that just builds so much tension on top of all of it. So, yeah.
So to what degree did you guys pre-visualize, storyboard, shot list? Like, how did you know especially given this situation where you've got to do lockups and release cars and stuff like that, you had to know what you were getting, I assume. How did you prepare for that sequence?
Yeah, we knew there wasn't really any storyboarding on the whole film. It was really more like there'd be a shot list. He'd come up with a shot list, and then we deviate from there depending on what would end up happening. Sometimes the equipment would break down. It was like, okay, we got to go to plan B, or sometimes the lockup was an issue, and okay, we got to do this instead. And so you just had to be able to be really fluid with your plan. You had a script and everything, and obviously what he wanted to have happen, but it was also, there was a bit of discovery in the process too, because when we really got out there on the roads, and we're following in a Suburban van, so we've got wireless video to the Suburban van, and we're looking at everything on little 7-inch monitors. It wasn't like, you're really getting a sense of the scale of it. But I remember the moment when Serge was pulling focus. He's in the van with us, and he's pulling focus, and he's just racking focus, and he racks to the crest of the hill just to see what he could pull off. It was more just, I don't think it was like he was just kind of messing around. But once he hit that moment when you were coming over the hill, and he pulls focus right to it, and then throws it back, it was like, even on the small monitors, like, brilliant. Holy shit, that's crazy. And Paul was like, I don't know if I'm going to use that. And it was like, and then, but then when we saw it, then when you see it on the big screen, I just remember the first time we saw it in dailies, I was like, holy shit, that's wild. And it was really seeing that kind of thing, every day. And then you kind of start to feel, okay, this works better than this. So let's go, let's try to shoot some more stuff this way, that kind of thing. And, yeah, it was really interesting how that process evolved, because as we were looking at dailies every night and, you know, coming up with, he was obviously thinking like, hey, I think I need to get a shot of this, or, let's do this kind of a thing. And, the end scene where there's this place called the Texas Dip, which is where she drives up the hill and then parks the car and runs off, and he smashes into the back of the car. And, again, that was another interesting hill that Michael Glazier had found. He and Flo had come up with, and it was like, okay, let's use this. So we built a crash cam in the front of the car that we could actually run into the other car with, and then just shot the ending part of the scene like on this very serene ridge where she's camped out and shoots the other guy and all this kind of stuff. I'm just geeking out, dudes. I'm sorry.
Dude, so am I. I mean, to me, that's like one of the best sequences I've seen in years. It's so well done.
Yeah. I kind of want to jump.
Yeah. I mean, they killed it on the editing. Yeah. Go ahead.
Because, there is it's impossible to draw a direct parallel between the one battle after another car chase and the French Connection car chase, except they're both these like white knuckle experiences. They're both wholly their own, but they both occupy such an important climax of the movie very, very late in the story. When you're talking about like how influential the French Connection was on, preparing for this, it seems structurally, tonality, all of these influences coming from something that's 53 years old. It's kind of amazing, but there is like there's a feeling. Can you talk just a little bit more about what else about French Connection besides the fact that there's this climactic car chase that takes place in it? What else in particular was really drawing on for inspiration?
There's a bunch. I think it was really like the texture of it and the rawness. That was really a lot of it too, was the rawness of like when you look at how Owen Roizman lit some of those interiors. And then granted, they had like $5 to make that movie. I mean, I got lucky enough to talk to a few people who worked on it or were associated with it. So you could just kind of, it was scrapping along on that thing, but the aesthetic worked so well. And it was really it really gave us, I think, the comfort of like, okay, let's just try some stuff. And, the license to do that, because, there's a lot of like, like for example, some of the sequences where Perfidia, Tiana Taylor's character is on the phone and she's making calls and stuff. Like there was very little light on her face. It was really like, let's try some stuff with underexposure, overexposed backlights, like way overexposed, 2, 3 stops, 4 stops, 5 stops, and really embrace that kind of stuff, and just the natural light bouncing around in a space. And you'd bend it a little bit, but you'd really try and minimize it and embrace what that was, which is pretty much what they had to do on that film, because on French Connection, because they were just, they just didn't have they didn't have the infrastructure to do anything different. That was really inspiring.
It's really interesting to me too, because it is an incredibly influential movie. Looking at this movie, it's interesting to me to see these parallels of this sort of really what was sort of I won't call it a B movie, but it was a low budget, it was a low budget thriller that I don't think that there was a ton of expectations about, but it became this real cultural touchstone for a whole series of movies in the 70s, and then still influencing, production today. It's that to me is amazing.
Totally.
And it's really great to see you taking your putting your stamp on this and doing your own thing with Paul Thomas Anderson and coming up with this fantastic, fully original, and also at the same time, paying homage to this climactic sequence from something that's, half a century ago. I really enjoyed it. I watched to the very end of the credits, and friend of the show, Adam Somner, has been on the show and stuff. I was so incredibly touched at the little, just the little, like it was like almost like a nothing sort of moment over the walkie put into like the very end of the movie. But so for all of us who knew Adam and for everyone who worked with him and such, it's like that was such a really sweet thing. I know that this was his last movie, so that was super cool.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, man, I was lucky enough to have done, well, 5 movies with Adam and Paul. And plus, obviously music videos and things like that. And then I did Munich with him and also Ford versus Ferrari. And so I'd done, probably 7 or 8 movies with Adam. I knew him quite well. And yeah, Paul and I have talked a lot about just like what, it's going to be trying to, create with Adam had this beautiful way of just managing and understanding people and just, and it's all on the screen. And it's just so interesting to, how many filmmakers he worked with, Scorsese and Ridley Scott, Tony Scott and Spielberg and Paul and, Angelina Jolie and James Mangold. And it's just, the list goes on. I'm so glad that the film, is so connecting with so many people because he would, Paul and I have talked about it. He would be so proud of what he was part of creating and so essential in creating.
Is there something that you'd like to get on a soapbox about or talk about?
One of the things is that this film, like, because we're shooting film, and a lot of times we wouldn't see dailies for 3 or 4 days because, we're someplace and by the time it gets down to photocam, it gets developed and gets back to us. So I take a lot of photos. And so it's like, when I go through the like almost 10,000 photos I have from this job, and it's just like seeing all the different environments we were in. And, there's a lot of moments in this film that are, that I realized, because it's been a bit since we did this. I mean, because we finished in July of 2024. And it was, it's really interesting to go back and look at the stuff because like the rooftop sequence in El Paso and all that, where when the skateboarders grab him and they, running across the rooftop and all this stuff. And just, there's a lot of moments that it's interesting how things come together. Like so many times in my career, you'll be working on a set and you've got everything dialed in to the, it's all planned out and it's all dialed. And so much of this movie was really about there was planning, but it was also just catching what was happening. And Paul's openness to, like half the people in this movie weren't even actors. They were just folks that they had cast, that Cassandra had found. And it's really interesting to see that because you can see it in the film. Every day was just like, you had to get comfortable with the uncomfortable and realize that, like, for me, it was always a thing of like, I knew we were doing stuff in a good spot when I was really like questioning all of it, which is kind of weird, but it's like, I mean, there's times where it's like, like the beginning scene in the film when we're shooting in that house in Willis and Bob's house, which was an actual, like up in the hills in Eureka in the middle of nowhere. It's like 600 square feet. It's dumping rain outside. And, so there's no place to hide. You can barely get the camera in there and the core crew. And, there's the thing where the kid comes to the door and he's like, "Hey, you guys at the dance? You at the dance?" And he grabs that kid and he's like, and then he closes the door and he's talking to her and he's like 4 stops under. And I'm like, that was one of our first days of shooting. And so when you've got like a star at the level of like Leo, and I'm like, yeah, you're like, okay, is he going to be cool with like going and, being dark or being like all this kind of stuff. And I had never worked with DiCaprio before, but that guy I get it. I totally get it because he brings a level of game that it's just, there's not a lot of actors who will go that way. Like he's like, like the scene in the apartment when he goes and he calls Commander Josh or Comrade Josh, and he goes to the windows and he's going to close the curtains and the curtains fall down. I mean, that was just because they were rigged like shit. And he just totally ran with that. Like normally, be like, all right, cut, guys, let's fix the curtains. What's going on here? There was none of that. It was you embraced all these happy accidents, and as a cinematographer, you had to be comfortable with all of that. You had to be comfortable with like, okay, we're going to be under here. We're going to be overexposed. This is going to be, we were pushing most of the movie. We pushed it at least a stop. And because it was Vista, we found we could push a stop in half. We could push 2 stops. We even tested a 3-stop push just to see what photochem was capable of. And the 3-stop push wasn't right for us, but it was like, you could keep stretching and keep pushing all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And it's like, but all that kind of like grain and that kind of things, which, normally it's like, okay, give me, especially in digital, in the world that we soak in now, it's all about like a pristine image. Blacks are super rich, whites are super crisp. And this was like, we're going to take this format in VistaVision and turn this piece of Kobe beef into a McDonald's hamburger in the right way. And it was like, by just totally banging on it. And, there's a reason that we had like 450 millimeter lenses. And, because they each had unique characteristics that radiated so well, depending on where Paul was feeling that the scene had to go. And it's just like, it's such an interesting approach because there was no like, I don't know, it's one thing because I see cinematographers I worked with who do great work and their process is very like, okay, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this. And this was just like, dude, it's free jazz all day long. And, and it was cool.
You guys had a plan, totally. But it's also like improvised. It's,
we always quote that line in Spinal Tap, where they're like, in the first Spinal Tap, where they're like, I'm not going to play a freeform jazz odyssey in front of a festival crowd or something, something like that. And that's basically what we have, days like that. And he would just say that at the beginning of the day. I'm doing festival crowd today. And it's like, I knew what that meant. It means like, Leo's going to come up or, whatever. And you're just going to embrace. And then you threw Benicio in the mix. And it was like, the two of them together, it was like, it was really interesting. And I think one of the things for me was just like, we didn't never have any of that level of control that I've had on so many other productions. Like, oh, it's adjust the lights this way or dim this down or turn that up. We're so limited on that. And because so many of the locations were practical and we're going to go in and shoot. And this is cool. Let's go do it. And that's a thing, man. That's a thing. It's not for everybody. People who know what the expectation is and know how to communicate in the visual language the director likes. And so it's just, it's really was an interesting way to pass the ball around. And it was pretty exciting. It's exciting now. At the time, I was stressed as hell, man. I got to tell you. I gaffed Bling Ring with Harris Savides, and it was one of the last films he did before he died. And it was interesting because I'd always wanted to work with Harris. Like, he's the man. And just had been so inspiring, just all of his work, obviously it still is for so many cinematographers today. And, that movie was very limited on funds. Tana, the grip on One Battle, she and I did it together. And, it was the thing Harris was really all about in that film. And I don't know if it was just because where he was at in his life. But he was just like, look, let's, he's always like, keep it simple and go and make mistakes. We want to make mistakes. We want to basically fuck shit up. And if it goes wrong or something doesn't work, just blame me. Like, he was just like, and I was just like, huh? I mean, it was the first time I had heard somebody say something like that from a creative point of view. And it was just such a fresh take on things that I just had never thought about it. And it wasn't meaning, be sloppy on your work from a being lazy standpoint. It was just good things happen when you just screw up or you try something and it fails. And that is just advice that has been so helpful and it was so critical for this movie, for One Battle, because there was things that would happen and you just embrace them. And because, that fell over. Well, maybe it's better, and that all came from like those conversations with Harris of just like, yeah, this is how we should do this thing. And it was really, it's just such a, that's the thing of like, it doesn't matter the budget level, because big movies are just big problems. There's just more problems as you go higher up. There's more people involved in the creative decision making, all that kind of stuff. And so to be able to hear that from somebody who's played at all levels of the game was really like, wow, it was very inspiring.
Your point of view of this is so different than a lot of people we talk to, and I mean the work speaks for itself. It's such a great film, and I don't know, like this is the time of year where we're like talking to people and we're like, who's going to get nominated? Who's going to get nominated? I'll be shocked if this doesn't get nominated for best cinematography. It really deserves it.
Well, I mean, thanks for that. It's just like, when we're making it at the time, you're just like, oh my God, how are we going to get through this day? How are we going to make this work? The camera's jamming. Holy shit. I mean, it's like 20% of the time the camera would jam. You'd be like in the middle of a great take. Oh my God, this is amazing. I was like, and it would just be like, and Serge would open up the mag and just film goes flying out. And it's just like, and you're just like, damn. I mean, and it's been interesting. I talked a little bit with Robbie and just like the journey they went with the Will Cam and all that stuff, because I know they had issues too. I mean, the thing is when you commit to VistaVision, you commit. You're like, okay, I'm going to do this thing. And I've heard of other folks who've gone down the road and they've been like, oh my God, this isn't the right fit for us, And
yeah, it worked out for the Brutalist last year,
I totally did, but they also, and Lowell did an amazing job on that film. I mean, I think the big thing for this one was like, okay, we're going to try and do the whole movie on this thing. And the other thing that was interesting, not to go down another rabbit hole, but it was like, he was all adamant about releasing on Vista. And this is the interesting part when you back into that, because to release on Vista, they had to get the projectors. They had to find the projectors. They had to get them all set up and all that stuff, which is the whole thing. But then he wanted to pull the print off of original neg. So meaning like a lot of times when you're shooting something, you can go in and be like, okay, cool. I'm going to, I'll window this out later when in post, I'm going to take that down later. Those weren't options. That was not an option at all, because he was going to take off the original negative onto VistaVision, because about 80% of this movie is VistaVision. There's about 20%, which is a mix of Super 35, which we had to do because of sound, or because we could do a longer take. You can do 11 minutes versus 4 minutes is what we got out of the Vista. And so I'm always in the back of my head when we're making this thing, I'm like, there's so many critical exposures and difficult exposures on this film. I had like the focus, I had the single channel with the iris. I was just constantly on that thing. And it was like, like that scene, the shot where Lockjaw's driving along and Tim Smith, the assassin, pulls up next to him and tells him to roll the window down, and the window goes down, and he points the gun at him.
Freaking amazing!
Yeah.
I mean, like just a school in suspense and payoff, and
yeah.
And, oh God!
The Christmas adventurers are also toting shotguns.
I know.
That was that was like a jump out of my seat moment in the movie theater.
But that exposure was, oh my God! It was like because it's like we're in the desert. We ended up shooting that thing at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Sun is blasting. It's like 6,000 foot candles out there. We've got so much cream source parked into the bottom of that car just to get an exposure on John's face. I think John, who played the actor, and it was like, who played Tim Smith, and it was just like, and then then you've got the tint in the window, and then the window rolls down, and I don't know. It was just like there's a million of those kind of things in this movie.
What a perfect moment of cinema, though. I mean, like what a absolutely perfect. That's the kind of thing people will be. I will be referencing for years to come. Like it's such a great moment, and the movie's full of those kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many little like Sensei's Dojo. I mean, we could just geek out for like hours here because like Sensei's Dojo, that was in a completely abandoned warehouse space, nothing in it at all. Just pile of garbage in the middle when we scouted it. And Flo and Anthony went in there and completely created that environment. But one of the things is they made all the fluorescents in the ceiling because we didn't have enough time to put in dimmable ballasts and all this kind of stuff, which you normally do so you can control the level. He was just like, look, dude, we got to get this thing going for next week. So we're just popping them up. And so that's a set exposure level. Like you can't change that. And I'm like, so we're like turning lights off and unscrewing bulbs and trying to do it just to get so we could balance exposures because you had them like it's day outside, when she's doing her karate routine, and he's like, "You're not breathing." And then, okay, we're going to go to night mode when Bob comes in, and the cops are going to drive by, and he's going to, and it was just, I'm riding this thing like I'm riding the exposure like it's crazy. And, and then he shuts off all the lights, and he's like, "Bob, don't step on the tataka," or whatever. I can't remember exactly what he said when they're leaving, and their silhouette. And it was so many moments of just like, holy shit, is this going to work? And, that was like the overriding conversation in my head most of the time. It's just that. And then just having so much of a great cast that just were coming up with stuff and, like, hey, I'm going to do it this way, or whatever, or just happen. And you just like, and the thing with Paul also in his process, reshoots are not a dirty word. Like, you'll go back and you'll reshoot a scene because like, so Sensei's Dojo, for example, we had that place for like a month because they had, a month and a half or whatever, the whole time, the huge chunk of the time we were shooting in El Paso. And so we started shooting, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm going to go back there in another week. I want to take it a different direction." Or he was talking to the actors, and the actors like, "I think my character might do a little bit more of this, or we should maybe explore this." And so you just have the set and you just go back to it and you shoot again. And these improv moments that happen just because of the environment that was created is really kind of the strong narrative throughout the entire film, just on both sides, technically and acting wise, which is really interesting.
Where can people find you online if they wanted to reach out, say hi, Instagram, TikTok? What do you do? What's your poison?
I'm a big Instagram lurker, not a big poster, which is something I got to work on because I got
same here.
A lot of stuff to share. But it's I'm at Instagram. I'm on my last name. It's Bauman Lights, so it's my last name BaumanLights.
If you want to plug your companies by name.
Yeah, no, I mean, Lightyear, which is, we've been doing LED lighting solutions for almost 20 years. Thank you.
All right, that was Michael Bauman. Michael, thank you so much for being on the show. It was great chatting about one battle after another. All right, Ben, it is our short end time of the show. It's the time we talk about our pet obsessions. What are you all obsessed about this week?
Yeah, I want to talk about, as I said earlier, I want to talk about a way that I used AI that maybe somebody listening to this right now is like, facing the same problem that I was facing, and AI can solve this problem for them. I'm making kind of a corporate video for a live gala event that is coming up very quickly.
Oh, right on. And
our schedule is very short. It was actually shot by our mutual friend, Bill Totolo, who did an amazing job shooting it. And we had to do 18 interviews that are going to be crammed into 2 relatively short videos. One's going to be 5 to 6 minutes long. One's going to be like 3 minutes long. And 18 interviews. It's a lot, right? In the olden days, what I would have done is I would have brought in all the interviews, put them all on their individual timelines, gone through the timelines, and either marked it up or probably more like I would have pulled a bunch of selects and thrown them onto a timeline. Starting maybe like 5-6 years ago when Premiere added transcription into it, and all the editing software does this. This isn't me saying Premiere is better than anything else. I would, bring it in, transcribe it, and then I would look for the keywords from the script or the outline, pull those onto a timeline, yada, yada, yada. This time what I did, I ingested everything into Premiere, transcribed all of it, exported the transcripts, brought everything into Claude, the AI by Anthropic, told Claude to go through every interview and pull the relevant quotes, give me a list of relevant quote pulls according to the outline that I was going with, and to make sure that every one of those people were represented, and make sure that it was verbatim, because I actually had a client once who used ChatGPT actually to do this exact same thing, and ChatGPT hallucinated a bunch of quotes that didn't happen, and it ended up making me take more time than to figure out what the hell.
No, it changed the quotes. Oh no.
Oh, totally. So, but basically I went through and it took Claude a while because it's 18 interviews. It's a lot, and it's just going through the text. But I'd say in about 15 minutes, Claude had a pull list that got me, I'm going to say 75% of the way there to certainly further along. And it took me, what would have taken me probably 2 days, took me maybe half a day to do it.
It was like a research tool. Yeah.
Yeah. And like more than once, I'm like, somebody said something really good, like about, so I go to Claude and say, who said that? And it would pull up the exact quote. And I'd be able to drop that right into the timeline. I feel like I needed kind of a shortcut to the stuff that would take a long time, so I could spend my time on the stuff that's really going to matter, for this thing, so it could be really polished and wonderful. And it's funny when I think about all the AI that I just use now without thinking about it. And it's in Premiere, but it's in Resolve, it's in Final Cut Pro. Like I'm using it to retime music. I'm using it to clean up the audio because we recorded in kind of an echoey room, and it takes it right out, the speech enhancer. And again, all of them have some version of this. And, it's making it better, and it's speeding up my workflow. So Ilya, what is your pet obsession this week?
My pet obsession is 11/22/63. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, it's the Stephen King series.
Stephen King miniseries, and it is 10 years old. I think it's really interesting because, of course, January, it seems to be an internet trend these days for people to be posting things from 10 years ago. Well, 10 years ago, I was watching 11/22/63.
Wow.
And it was great. And I just rewatched the whole thing. In fact, I rewatched it with my entire family, and I'll go on the record saying that I believe it is the best Stephen King miniseries ever made. I think it's really, really good. And James Franco is in it. He's, I think, the best I've ever seen him in anything, including 127 Hours. I think he's just, absolutely kills this. And the whole idea, of course, is that there's some time travel, there's some horror elements, and it's just a really, really solid show. So if someone out there is looking for something that, it's the number 2. When I looked at Netflix yesterday, it's currently on Netflix. It was originally made for Hulu. It was the first big made for Hulu miniseries.
I remember.
Now that Netflix has licensed it or purchased it or whatever it is, it's over there. But it's the number 2 show on Netflix. So here's something 10 years old that was really good. I never felt like it really got its due. And an entirely new generation of people are finding it. And maybe people like myself who saw it 10 years ago. I think it's really, really solid, worth your time. And for once, I shouldn't say for once, because it does happen occasionally, when you watch a show, you're not really sure where it's going, which is really great.
I love that.
It's really great to me to find something
it's the best feeling when it's made well, so it's going to end somewhere interesting, and it's not amateur hour. There's plenty of things where you don't know where it's going, and it ends up in an unsatisfying place, but
And I remember that when it dropped on Hulu, it was one of those things where it was coming, I think, still weekly. You couldn't watch all the episodes, and I really enjoyed watching. Basically, I wouldn't say I binged it, but I watched one episode a night for 8 nights, and holy crap, that's a great way to experience it. So
I have a thought experiment that I like to run, which is who do you think has had a bigger impact on the culture, Stephen King or Stan Lee?
Oh, that's a great question. I'm going to go Stephen King.
Me too.
I'm going to go Stephen King. Stephen King, I feel like, certainly as far as emotional impact, I'm going to give it to King. I mean, not to say that Stan Lee's a slouch, and not to say that Stan Lee hasn't had a big impact, but if you're gonna put the celebrity death match of these creative geniuses in the same ring, I got to give it to King. King's incredible.
Yeah, I agree. Although I think a lot of people probably listening to this screaming at us both. Anyway.
You know what? Hey, look, I want to invite, if you are watching us on YouTube, if you're listening to the podcast somewhere, and you think that my sort of synopsis of the dominoes that are going to fall in AI or things that you have to look out for is wrong, or you think that Stan Lee is the greatest things in sliced bread, argue with us, get in the comments, tell us about what it is that how we got it wrong, because I'd love to hear it. I'd love to hear differing of opinions, because I assume silence is consent, and that when we say things like this that might be controversial,
so if you're listening to this and you don't yell at us, then you agree.
You agree. That's exactly right. So
that's awesome.
All right. So, Ben, that just about does it. Where can people track you down if they want to get in touch?
You can find me at benrock.com. Check it out and learn all about me. Woo. How about yourself, Ilya? Where can people find you?
You can find me over at the sponsor of this program, Hot Red Cameras, hotredcameras.com. Reach out if you need to buy cameras, lenses, lighting, drives. A lot of people have been reaching out to us lately for drives. We can help with all kinds of RAID systems, flash drives, backups. You name it, we can help with that. So codex drives. Holy crap. You want some codex drives for your, Alexa camera? I got them coming out of my ears right now. Okay. All right. So, Ben, who made this show possible? Who do we have to thank?
As always, our predator, our producer, editor, Alana Cody, who is still kicking all the ass, getting us tons of kick-ass interviews, and spends a lot of time putting this show together, both before and after. Then you and I come in and do this yakety-yak crap, and then she has to take over and make it into something cohesive, which won't be easy tonight for reasons that nobody will needs to know about. So we must thank Alana, all the respect in the world to her, and then also to our composer, Kays Alexakci, who composed every scrap of music that you hear on this show. Check out Kays' website, musicbykays.com, and you can also check out Kays' YouTube channel, Kays Labs, where he fixes synthesizers.
Terrific.
So, Ilya, would you like to take us out?
Thanks for tuning in.
This has been Cinepod, the cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory at hotrodcameras.com. Watch and subscribe to our show on YouTube or listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Follow and interact with us on Instagram, Threads, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn, but not X. Don't do that. Thanks for tuning in.